All right, we will get started. We will call this meeting of the Water and Sewer Authority of Cabarrus County, February 17th, 2022 to order. We have a quorum. We have three of our board members, Rob, Lynn, and Jim are all with us on Zoom. We are all in attendance. We will start with unfinished business. We have minutes from the January 20th, 2022 meeting. I do have a correction. Tammy's indicated that in the second motion in the minutes, switch, Mr. Ritchie made the motion and Mr. Marshall made the second. It was reversed in the minutes. So if you would approve it with those changes.
Motion to approve with the amendments or changes.
Got a second?
Lynn, second.
Okay, we got 2 seconds. Good deal. All right. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. All right, let's roll into new business. First item on the agenda is Town of Midlands Manager's Proposal. Mr. Wilson.
Doug contacted me back in early January about a proposal he wanted to put forth to the board. I've kind of outlined the steps as I understood them, and he confirmed that this was what he had relayed to me over the phone. The town of Midland is in the process of trying to acquire the water and sewer system from the city of Concord. In doing that, they're asking the board to consider allowing them to have a non-voting ex officio member on the board until that is completed. He also asked that that board member, ex officio member, be allowed to attend open and closed sessions of the board. And after the town acquires the system, that the ex officio status be modified to become a full voting board member. In exchange for this commitment, the town agreed to up to $1 million of their ARP money they will receive in 2 installments to go toward the design of the Muddy Creek wastewater treatment plant expansion. And then they would seek additional funds from Raleigh to go toward the construction of that expansion. It has indicated to me that this has not been to his council yet. This is his proposal, and he's run it by the mayor and one other council member. But if our board agrees with it, he'll run it by his entire board or his entire council. So I'm presenting you that information. I ask William to be prepared or to prepare for our next meeting if the board desires. What steps would be necessary to proceed? The board decided to go this way. Advise legal ramifications this would have and what procedures we'd have to go through and board members or accept this offer. So anyone wants to discuss it at this time or have we address it now?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. So you're saying that the proposal says that the ex officio member, at the moment they buy the system from Concord, becomes an automatic member of the board? Is that what I hear you saying?
I think that's what their intent is, yes.
And so that didn't.
Mike, this is Lynn. Where did the proposal or where did the request come from?
Came from
I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
it came from Doug Paris, the city manager.
Okay, yeah, okay. I'm with you now. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
But that then makes a 10-member board. So doesn't that cause some concerns that there may be situations in which there would be votes that would be tie votes? And does that really sound like an efficient way to run a board?
I agree. And I would hate for, as much as I support in general what's been laid out, And it feels like we are going down this road and all the parties have that same goal, which is great. But I do think at the board level, we have a lot more to consider than getting tied up in something that's automatically going to happen and we don't address what else might happen at the board level. So I completely agree with you. 10 is probably not a good place to land.
Right. And so what,
I agree with that.
yeah, and what Michael and I talked about earlier this week or over the last few weeks is that if the board would be so inclined is to kind of give me the green light. I've already been working on this, but to give me the green light to study this about how, if you guys decided you even wanted to go that route, how it would be effectuated. And then to your point, the unintended consequences, just to kind of roll through that, because it would affect the articles of incorporation for WSACC. It would affect our bylaws. And then there's a lot of stuff under chapter 162A, because it's really a two-step process. Potentially they're not a member jurisdiction and then they don't have a board seat. They're actually two separate things. You could be a member of WSACC and not necessarily have a board seat. And so it's a lot to get into, but what he kind of tasked me, if the board would be so inclined, is between now and the March 17th board meeting, I would do a deeper dive in all the steps. If we wanted to do this, what are your options? And then how we would put it into effect. But it's a multi-pronged thing. It's not just a WSACC board decision either. To allow them to become a member, that would take resolutions from each of the existing members. So the county would have to have a resolution authorizing that: Concord, Annapolis, Harrisburg, Mount Pleasant. So this is not something that's going to be put into effect where all of a sudden in April they have a board seat, no matter how fast we try to operate this. It is kind of a multi-step process under chapter 162A. And I did ask Mike to share, the board had actually looked into something similar to this back in 2018. And at that time, we had engaged the School of Government to do a proposal to this board, just talking about what they see other authorities around the state do. And at that time, it was just different set of facts. At that time, the School of Government and this board decided not to add Midland to the board. Now, obviously, the change of facts is Midland's possible acquisition of sewer infrastructure from the city of Concord. That does change the dynamics, because the School of Government said if they haven't really contributed any infrastructure and they don't have any of their own customers, then it would not be customary for them to be a member and have a board seat. But now this does potentially change the dynamic, this acquisition from Concord. So I think it is worth the board taking a look into this of it. And just because we look into it doesn't mean you commit to anything. It's just kind of looking through the mechanics of it. And so the idea would be I'd come back in March and present that.
I think that's a great path forward.
And I would say we need to share that with Doug as well, to let him know this is not just a, kind of what William just said, like there's a multi-pronged approach to this. This is not just simply checking a box, just to make sure he's aware of where that's stand.
Do we need to have William do a deeper dive for the next meeting, or are we comfortable getting that now? And
No, I just meant that we're doing a deeper dive if we do. Yeah, not. Information.
Yeah, let's shoot for that in the March meeting. Discussion about it. In the meantime, I think we can talk.
Sounds good. I'll work with Michael on that. We can track.
I've kind of got a question about this money too. I mean, the JRP funds that are coming in, and obviously City of Concord's gonna have some kind of deal brokered, I guess, with the town of Midland. And as far as, and this specifically says to expand Muddy Creek. As far as that's concerned, have we even started on trying to permit another expansion for Muddy Creek? I mean, we haven't even done that.
We have a permit to 1 million gallons. So we're permitted right now for 300, we're up to 300,000. We have a permit to go to 1 million. So we are permitted. We haven't started the design at all on it.
So this new design, if we expand to 1 million, it's going to be a major undertaking, just like.
It will be, because we're going to go from a package plant to a real
Right, so they'll have to
concrete and steel.
big hole, big holes, clarify.
Step and go into a big plant.
Yeah, it's an 18-month design project, It's probably a 24 to 30-month construction project. It's not, from when you go to when you're finished, it's a 4 to 5 year.
Right, my point is that $1 million does not go very far down the road to do that type of construction.
It probably covers the design. That's the thought of the $1 million. That would cover the design of the plant, not construction.
We don't feel that process, either financially or time-wise, doesn't affect our Rocky River, wouldn't affect the Rocky River project at all. Is that fair?
Essie's down the hall.
And that's right. And we'd actually looked into this earlier, back in 2019 as well, when Midland had approached us about this, and we had gone so far as to draft interlocal agreement between WSACC and Midland to fund this design work. And then we just never got to a signed agreement because Midland didn't have the capital at that time. But it sounds here again like they might have access to additional resources that then could do that. But that would be an agreement between WSACC and Midland to fund that design portion of it.
Where on the CIP is that? That expansion? It's way out now, isn't it?
It's 20,
We looked at that for a couple hours today, and I can't remember the exact, it's either 24, 25 for the design or 25, 26, but I believe the design is 24, 25 with expansion starting the construction starting the following year. So it's in that 4 to 5 year out.
Just going from my feeble memory, it seemed to me that it was further out than that because in 18, when we were talking to Midland about this, accelerating the funding was really kind of what came up as far as this board was concerned.
Yeah, I believe when that was being talked about, the design was in the last year, in the 6th year of the CIP, and now we've been through 2 CIPs, so now it has moved up to the 4th year. So it just moved, it's kind of held at the same date, it's just moved up in the CIP as we've gone on.
Chad, while you're standing up, is it likely that expansion would then affect our request to go from 34 up to wherever we go to because of hydraulic and chemical load into the river? Because those two discharges are not that far apart.
Right, it could, and I'm going off of memory on numbers, but if I remember, and Thomas, correct me, but the Rocky River discharge where you're at on Rocky River, you're before Coldwater and Irish Buffalo come in, which are 2 significant contributors to the Rocky River. Where that discharge comes in, I believe when you look at that 7Q10 type number, that low flow number, Rocky River is almost half the stream at 34 MGD. It's like 60. Yeah.
right now, it's about 62.5.
Yeah, so you're like half the flow. Midland or Muddy Creek at 1 MGD is like 2% of the river flow.
Okay.
Is that, it's something like that?
It's
wasn't
even
it?
less than that.
Yeah,
So it's not going to likely inhibit Diener from making a decision to allow us to go to wherever we can go to.
correct. Correct. I don't think it would have significant impacts. It would be a contributing factor, but not a significant.
Okay.
Are there, anybody, Jonathan, are there annexation agreements between Concord, Midland and Harrisburg? Is all that?
So we now have an annexation agreement with Midland.
Harrisburg's annexation agreement with them expires this year, and we're negotiating it now.
Is this area for this plant serve only the Midland growth area, or is it Concord and Harrisburg?
No, it would generally be all Midland with the exception, but wouldn't be all of Midland. So that northern section, northwest side would go to Rocky River. But Midland proper and south would go to Muddy Creek.
They have a huge service area.
They'll be the exclusive beneficiary of this expansion.
I would,
And-
that is correct.
And Chairman, I got a couple of comments and I guess questions about it. Obviously, I'm a new kid on the block, so I'm not as familiar as the few times that this was discussed previously. But I did review the School of Government write-up, and obviously we're familiar with our joint agreements with Midland. I would just point out that, it is extremely rare to adjust the board after the fact. And that it's going to be complicated. So we probably need to communicate that out pretty aggressively, that even if this was something that everybody in the room wanted to do immediately, it would still be a really long and complicated process to achieve, because each of our respected elected boards are going to have to sign off on it as well. So that's a complicating factor. And I don't, just my personal, observation, just looking at the current voting makeup, I don't think you add another vote to the board without substantially changing the voting makeup, which becomes an entirely larger negotiating point for everybody involved. The county currently has 3 voting blocks that I believe, and again, I'm the new guy, so I wasn't here when this was set up back in the 90s. So, but generally, those are set up to represent the smaller entities like Midland, who don't necessarily have large utility complexes and are involved in this. That's why the county has more votes than Concord, let's say, because they're representing everybody. So I do believe Midland has representation currently, but I do understand their desire to have official representation, or I guess exclusive representation. But I would want to, and I guess this is my question, if we're going to be looking into this further, is I'd also want to look into kind of that part of it. Are we going to look at options and bring back options of how this board would look if we were to add Midland to the board? Because I mean, one of the things that jumps out to me is, reducing the county vote to 2 and adding 1 for Midland, excluding theirs out of the county and giving it to them exclusively. Again, that's just something I'm thinking out loud, and I probably shouldn't say it in a board meeting, but those are the types of things I would want to think about too, because I'd really want to look at, what effect does this have above and beyond just the operation of WSAC, but the operation of the board and the dynamics. And there's a reason boards don't change, even sometimes when they're not set up perfectly. It's because the devil, you adjust to, and it works. And anytime you change it, it can get pretty sticky. So I just wanted to point those out.
Other questions or comments?
Well, this is Lynn, just for a minute. If you remember, whenever we did the capacity allocation committee, we put Midland on there. So it's not like Midland don't have a little bit of piece of the action, but as far as being ex officio and being a voting, I think, Mike, you said they wanted a non-voting position, but I agree with the last speaker, and obviously since I'm on the phone and this is a new guy, so I'm not sure who that was, but I tend to agree the makeup of the board. Who was it?
Sorry, I should introduce myself. This is Rob Dunham, town manager for Town Harrisburg.
Oh, okay, Rod. Nice to have you with us. And I apologize for not being there, but I've been up at Duke Hospital all day, and I just got in probably about 4:30. So it's been a little bit long of a day for me. But anyway, I think that you're right in your summary that it would surely change the makeup of the board. And I know Jonathan Marshall is there. I would imagine he's there from the county, and he could probably speak, about this. But I think that, we'd be going down a path that we don't need to go, at least at this time. And that's just my observation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, let me clarify. I said that they wanted a non-voting member until they acquired the system from Concord, and then they wanted full voting membership.
Okay, so they did want a full voting on the actual WSAC board.
Yes, sir. After they acquired the system from Concord.
Yeah, well, I personally, as for me, I couldn't support that, but I'm only one member, and and I'm not the new kid, but I'm next to the new kids. Anyway.
Rob, did you get a promotion?
Yeah, we'll have an announcement out. I guess I jumped the gun on that one for you too. So yes, sir. So everybody looking here, you get your news here first. So
Put it on Instagram already. Go ahead.
that's right. We should.
Yeah.
We should be making that official announcement shortly.
Okay.
Okay.
Jeff, do you or Jennifer or both maybe know as far as these sewer lines that Midland's gonna get from the city of Concord? Do they include the areas that are not served by Muddy Creek that do discharge to Rocky River?
So if I understand your question, the answer is yes. So we have a defined boundary now between Concord and Midland that includes some areas again along their western boundary with Harrisburg and their northern boundary with us, that flow would geographically go to Rocky River. There's not, it's a really narrow band, so it's not like a huge chunk, but it is a very, right now, a very active area that is, has a ton of development pressure right there in that area. But then the rest, again, the rest sort of goes southeast through downtown proper and to Muddy Creek.
It
So
would probably be good, in addition to William giving his legal opinion, for you guys to help us orient at the next meeting, those details.
sure.
Some maps or something.
Where all the flow goes and where the boundaries are and where the annexation boundaries are. A map would be awesome to understand that a little better.
And I think again, as some background, the county still owns Muddy Creek wastewater treatment plant, and we have an operation and maintenance agreement with WSAC. And, you know, we explored transferring that to WSAC, and the way it was acquired and dealing with a certain law firm, just kidding, and they're your clients, we could not reach a resolution on that, to transfer that to WSAC. So the county will continue to own, and I don't see anything in this proposal that would change that ownership. And frankly, I don't think we could change that ownership short of even more extracted legal work. I think the county will continue to own that treatment plant.
The other thing is, the other piece of the puzzle, don't we have a longstanding policy on certain, I remember us paying some for some sewer line that WSAC did on our behalf years ago. That were exclusively for us. So we ended up, we had an additional charge we paid WSAC for that. We haven't done any of that since, but that was a long time ago, but.
We had, I think you're talking about the acceleration policy where
Yeah,
you want to
exactly.
move items
Yeah.
up for a
Quicker and-
number of years, and
Yeah, that's right.
we came up with a formula where you paid a certain amount yourself, and then we paid the rest. And that's sort of what we proposed initially 2 years ago, is that they would front the money. We would do the design to accelerate the project. And they never did execute their agreement.
So how much of Concord's flow now would be moved over to them that is a part of the Muddy Creek portion?
I don't know that I completely understand, but so Concord would have no flow going to much. If Midland took the system within their planning limits, Concord would have, I don't believe anybody but Midland. Their planning area would be the sole contributor to Muddy Creek.
I guess I'm asking, how much is Concord transferring to?
Well, our intention would be everything in their planning area boundary. So we
You have
have,
a number that, are we talking about 250 of the 300,000 that's?
About 150.
It's about 175 at Muddy Creek, and then I would say somewhere around 50 to 100,000 comes from Porter Ridge.
Yeah.
100's probably high.
Okay,
But something of, 250,000 out of 8.5 million, 9 million gallons.
okay. Thank you.
I think that question gets even a little bit more complicated when you realize that the planning area and the annexation area do not match. So that area that, Jeff keeps talking about, kind of has the most interest, is actually in Harrisburg's planning area, but it's not our annexation or utility district. So it's complicated.
We have a tough time getting in the middle of things like that, but I think we have the ability here to make sure all that's cleaned up. Before we don't move forward with anything, so that does make a lot of sense to figure that out on behalf of everybody. Another bridge to cross at some point.
And even though Midland participated in the allocation process. They don't have an allocation, is that right?
That is correct. And we have a sewer agreement with them on what allocation we provided. And I think that was a win-win for both parties, which was fantastic. So we have an agreement that sets forth what they get and when they get it. So that it's predictable for us, it's predictable for them.
Does that mean that they would be added to that allocation agreement that we are already set up and have signed off on, that they would be another member to that agreement? Is that what you're suggesting you think is going to happen?
I would think that, and then looking forward to 2024, 2027, that's going to be a mammoth part of this, is figuring out how that works.
Other questions or comments?
Cassie, they've instructed the attorney to come back with all the research on it and what all we need to change within our articles of incorporation bylaws and any other contracts that may have issues, and at the next meeting and give them an update on it.
Thank you.
Okay, we will take that up next meeting. All right, we'll move on. We have agenda item number 2, request for approval of a contract for independent audit for Pottering Company. Christopher.
Good evening. Item for you tonight for your consideration is to award the contract for the independent annual audit. It is staff's recommendation to award that contract to Pottering Company. A couple months ago, myself and John Capper came up here and did the financial statements to you guys. That was the 5th and final year of a pricing proposal. So in January, I sent out requests for proposals to 3 regional firms, Martin Starnes, Dixon Hughes, and Pottering Company. Didn't get as many responses as I would hope for, but Pottering Company did have a reasonable response to our RFP, and we are going to recommend that you award that contract to them. We did not do a 5-year price proposal. It's only a 3-year price proposal. That seems to be a little bit more common right now, and that was what they were comfortable with. And that's the recommendation. It's $18,000 base. It's about $2,000 more than we paid this year, with also some additional fees in case when some of the state money comes in, if that leads to a single audit, that's covered as well. Or I guess for additional fee. So recommendation is to award that contract to Pottering Company. I can answer any questions.
Any questions?
It
Motion,
says for 2022 that there would be.
For fiscal year ending 2022, so at the end of this fiscal year. So I would say the cost will be next fiscal year.
Right. Any other comments, or questions? Your motion to award the contract to Pottering Company.
So moved.
Mr. Chairman.
A motion, got a second?
Second.
Second. All right, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carried.
Now Tammy thinks we're just messing with her.
All right, next agenda item is award construction contract for Lower Back Creek Interceptor Rehab. project. Come on.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, come to you about the Lower Back Creek Interceptor Rehab Project. We've been here a couple times talking about this in recent months. Last summer, last fall, we had Fraser Engineering begin on the design for this project. And again, this is a portion of this interceptor between Farm Mill Road and Rocky River. And it was showing some signs of wear from corrosive gases and just general wear over time. So we did receive bids for that project on January 25th. We received 6 bids, so we had lots of interest in the project. Had quite a range there, from roughly $2.5 million to $10.5 million. You can see that they were mostly between $2.5 million and $2.8 million. That was roughly in line with the engineer cost estimate. So we would recommend, based on Fraser Engineering's recommendation, recommend to the board and request approval for to award that contract to Insituform Technologies. And along with that, we would like to award the services during construction to Fraser Engineering moving forward as well. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So, or I guess this would be a question for you, Concord, Kannapolis. Anyone used this firm before?
Yes.
They get most of our lining projects.
That may be where I'm going with this is, we had an issue with one of the, a very minor issue for us, very major issue for a household in one of those. And I was wondering if that was. the same
This is not the same one.
one. Thank you.
So both contracts you're recommending the same.
The construction contract will go to In Situ Form Technologies. That is for 2.495 million. And then the services during construction piece would go to Fraser Engineering. That's our recommendation.
Any questions? A motion to that effect to award construction contract $2,495,086.97 to Instituform Technologies and the engineering
Ms.
contract.
Lynn, I move for approval.
Motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, moving on to, let's see, item 4. Mr. Wilson, this is just money to pay for.
Right, we gotta pay for it now. That's for a project ordinance amendment and a annual budget ordinance amendment in the amount of $2,618,087, and that would come from our retained earnings to fund the cost of this project.
Move to approve both, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
I got a motion on the floor and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 All right, motion carries. Okay, next item, we're talking about a scope of services fee to Black and Veatch for the WSACC master plan. Chad.
Chairman, members of the board, as I was here last month, we went through a selection process, selected the Black and Beach to lead a team to perform the WSACC master plan effort. As I've outlined in the scope and fee, what we're bringing this month to you. This is a pretty big engineering contract here, scope to be over $3.5 million. The thing I wanted to, I wrote in my memo, I want to clearly lay out, we're essentially doing 3 very significant studies at the same time here in the same effort. And due to the growth we're seeing and some of the challenges we're facing as an organization, it makes sense to do these together at this time. But I would like to point out that there are between the master planning effort itself, the safe yield, detailed safe yield analysis that we're going to be doing, and then the complex permitting effort that we're going to undertake at Rocky River. You have 3 very significant studies that are going to take place. Mike Osborne with Black and Veatch is here tonight to do a short presentation on the master plan and what we're going to be doing. I encourage your questions, discussion as we move through this scope, because now is the time, if there's something that we don't have in the scope or something that maybe doesn't make sense that's in the scope, now's the time to discuss it and make sure we're aware of exactly the directions that the board wants to go and the expectations of the board. But I'll turn it over to Mike for his budget.
Thanks, Chad. And good evening, everyone. It's really great to be with you. My company is still not back in the office fully, so it's always great to be out with people and some faces. Thank you all for this opportunity today. So I'm going to talk through the project at a high level. Happy to answer any questions as we go along. If you want to go to the next slide. So we sat down with your staff and talked about project goals and what was important. And ultimately, the ultimate goal is the next NPDES permit expansion. And so as Chad was indicating in his opening remarks, there's multiple components to this, and it's actually a good plan to integrate all of those components as you're looking at your whole system so that you've accounted for the various factors that are important to operating a utility. And so, so these are, just to recap some of the goals, the NPDES permit expansion, develop your capital improvement projects and have a proactive plan instead of a reactive plan. You guys capture a lot of data. And so what we want to do is to utilize that data not only to develop your plan, but also give you tools and a platform to better manage or more effectively manage the utility going forward based on real-time data and dashboards.
Yeah, and this was a really important part for WSAC, for the staff. We feel like as an organization, it's kind of, we're data rich. When we look at 31 permanent sewer meters installed, the system development fees, the way we're capturing all that information when the building permits pulled, flow acceptance, the way we're tracking projects and when they're coming online from a capacity standpoint, that we have a lot of efforts that are taking place right now, but they're kind of taking place independent of each other and kind of having to be manually brought together and tried to look at make sense. So part of a task that we felt like Black and Beach came with a really strong plan was to utilize some new technology tools that are out there with the Power BI software package and stuff to be able to, not only for WSAC, but also the information that can be shared with our jurisdictions to be able to really monitor where we're at and where we're going from a real-time standpoint. So simply where the flow data that we have gets uploaded to this automatically, and every month that's updating and you can see where lines are. When you're pulling in system development fees and tying that to portions of the system in GIS, that's populating into this. And you're getting a tool that really provides a lot of functionality for, like you said, being proactive instead of being reactive as we move through the system.
And I don't think you can underestimate the value of that data to the jurisdictions, and that I would add the schools to that, because they are looking for very much real-time data when that flow from that house, or that, well, not necessarily business for them, but from a house, they want to know when that's online, and you're basically pulling that same data.
Yeah, the Power BI platform has really been a game changer, and it continues to get more powerful, more functionality every day. So that's what we're providing as part of the project. Next slide, please. All right, so we identified and broke down the scope into 6 tasks. Task 1 is the existing system evaluation, and that includes flow monitoring, gathering all the data that you have, and you have a number of spreadsheets that you're tracking. So we want to develop, get our arms around that data and put it into a format that can be used later as we go through the planning process. We'll be developing a hydraulic model for the whole system, for the whole sewer system, and looking at storms, the rainfall events, and calibrating the model so we have a good handle on how your system functions and where the flows are coming and going. Task 2, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in the next slides. Well, that's looking at future growth and stakeholder involvement with the jurisdictions and all the flows that are coming in from even Mecklenburg County. We want to work closely with the jurisdictions to understand those flows, make sure that we're planning for future growth, and that's included in the plan. Task 3 is the NPDES permitting process, and this is a pretty big task by itself. It's development of a Qual 2 water quality model for the entire reach of the Rocky River. So that's a 90-mile model. That's what DEQ is asking for, so that they can permit a new discharge into the Rocky River, so that they understand the stream system itself. And then that leads to environmental assessments, engineering alternatives analysis, and ultimately the NPDES permit application. Task 4, water resources analysis. One of the tasks that we were asked to undertake is looking at what your water supply is, your reservoir safe yield that serves the county, your interbasin transfer certificates, and comparing that to what the projections look like, so we can identify where your opportunities are, where your shortcomings might be, and develop a plan to close those gaps.
And we feel like this effort is very important for us to really look at this from a holistic standpoint. You need to make sure your supply of water and your wastewater treatment capacity are working together. The goal of this is not to tell Concord you're going to need more water in 10 years down off of Lower Rocky River Road or wherever it may be. That's not the goal of it. The goal is to look, what do we feel like our firm supply is out into the future and make sure our wastewater treatment capacity matches up with that. So this will be obviously involve a lot of coordination with the jurisdictions and a lot of stakeholder involvement when looking at this, making sure that we understand all the interconnections and all the agreements that are out there and all the plans that each jurisdiction has for both raw and finished water within their systems.
So I assume that the study that LKN is doing for Albemarle at Jack Neal is going to interface with what Black and Veatch is doing so that we can determine what the available capacity is going to be out of Albemarle. I'm guessing.
Through Concord, that would,
Right.
we would be working through Jeff and his team, making sure we had the right information from that.
Right, and more utilities are taking this approach of looking at water supply, water treatment, or wastewater treatment and discharge. It's a more holistic approach. In the past, a lot of times you would do a water master plan focus, and then you would do a wastewater, but there's so many synergies that you need to look at between the two. It's much better to marry those two up to understand what your opportunities are, what your challenges are, and be able to make them work together. So task 5 and task 6, this is really the development of the CIP and the ultimate master plan. And as part of that, this is where we'll be developing and fine tuning those dashboards and turning over the model, all of our data, transitioning those dashboards and that the data capture and updating over to WSACC. So that's a high level overview of the 6 primary tasks. We go to the next slide.
Can you back up one?
Yes.
So how extensive is task 3? Is it just to get us, is task 3 just to get us to the next expansion, or is there data in there to sort of explore the bigger picture, long-term permittability of future expansion?
Yes.
Is that outside, is that in the scope of this?
It is. And I've got a slide just for that. Okay. All right, next slide. So when we looked at how this project would unfold, it's very evident that we need to be collaborative and communicative with not only WSACC, but also the member jurisdictions and also Charlotte as they're sending flow over as well. So our plan is that we're going to have a robust communication plan, not only to gather information and share information, but also to keep everybody up to date as to how the project is progressing and what we're finding, so that there's input into the plan from all of the stakeholders. So it'll be a more comprehensive plan. All right, so I want to touch on the planning component. And so in your previous master plan, you had used the community biz model, and Jake Petrosky was on that team. And so he's on our project team as well. And I'm really excited about that because we'll be able to compare as we go through this process, compare what was done back in 2013 and previous to what the land use and the growth model looks like today. So it'll be, it's where you get an opportunity to have 20/20 hindsight. Well, this gives us an opportunity to look at what the projections were, what the plan was, but how it's really been developed and how it worked out in the end. And so this process, we're going to look at land supply. We're going to look at future land use, do a suitability analysis, and from that, we'll be able to develop growth forecasts, which then lead to flow projections to help us develop the master plan. Next slide. All right, so this is the NPDES permitting approach. So, thinking about what the next expansion level is. So DWR is the main regulatory agency that will guide this process. So it's essentially a 4-step process with a lot of work that is tied up in these 4 steps. And so DWR, we've had initial discussions with them and have been talking to them for some time. In fact, our team consists of 3 former regulators. 2 of them are retired, but they still consult. And between the 3 of them, they have well over 100 years of regulatory experience, right? And so they have great connections and relationships with the regulatory community. One of them actually wrote the rules back in the 70s and 80s. And so he knows all of them inside and out and has great relationships. So that coordination with DWR, we need to submit to them a modeling plan of what they expect from the model and how it's supposed to be run. So we've had initial conversations with them. And like I said before, for them to permit another expansion of discharge into the Rocky River, they want the whole, that 90-mile reach model for water quality. And so, so we understand that. We'll develop the modeling plan, present that to them, and collaborate with them to make sure that they're on board with it. And from there, 90 miles is a long stretch. We have to go out and perform field work and sampling, and that's usually during the summer. That's when the 7Q10 is the lowest flow in the stream. And so there's 50 locations that are planned for data collection. And it has to be done in a very short time. So we'll have multiple teams out in the field doing data collection during that short window, week or two, to gather the information that's required for input into the model the DWR is looking for. And from there, the model will be developed, calibrated, and this is really the opportunity for us to run a number of scenarios in advance of meeting with DWR. So we'll be able to sit down with Chad and his staff and say, okay, this is what these limits, this is what it looks like in the stream. And let's play with it, and let's get limits that we can support versus handing them essentially a model and an output and allowing them to say, this is what we want. Well, this is going to be based on scientific data that we've been able to work through, and we're going to have a proposition to them to start from. Okay, so that takes us through the modeling of to get to that submission of the model. And so the next step is, as we submit this, we're asking for speculative limits for the next NPDES permit. Once we receive the speculative limits, then that'll help us to focus on what steps in the environmental assessment that they want us to look at. You know, how far upstream, how far downstream, secondary cumulative impacts, and we'll be able to narrow that a bit better, that scope of work that's required. And in the meantime, we'll be developing an engineering alternatives analysis that looks at how you would expand the plant. And that actually is what's required is that you need to look at a variety of alternatives as part of that analysis. For example, do you expand at Rocky River? Do you design or locate a greenfield wastewater plant somewhere else in your system? And so it's a variety of alternatives that need to be evaluated, not only on cost, but also environmental impacts and so forth. And so the environmental assessment and the engineering alternatives analysis are combined together, and that's submitted to the state for approval. And once we get approval on those, then we can submit for the NPDES permit.
Mike, real quick, is there a public process in that sewer permitting? I'm going to just compare it to the IBT, where you have to have all these public meetings. Is there anything like that that could potentially open up?
There is. There will need to be a public comment period. So, and you know, that's something that we've accounted for that we need to work through who the appropriate stakeholders are. And if, even at the end, the environmental assessment has to be put in a clearinghouse for public comment. And so we'll have to address comments as they come back, not only from the state agencies, but yes, we'll have to have public hearings and things like that.
Is an evaluation of water reuse anywhere in the scope of services?
It is. Next slide. Well, you were just saying.
You anticipate everything.
Thank you. So as we've talked about, the water resources analysis, we're going to look at the reservoirs, all the flows that raw water or finished water that is coming into Ferris County. We're going to check the safe yield of those reservoirs. It's been almost 20 years since the analysis and the survey of how the sediment has come into those reservoirs has been done. So we're going to update that. We're going to look at historical droughts and just understand your water resources supply. And then we'll look at doing an adequacy analysis and compare that to the anticipated future demand. Understand if there are any gaps, if there's any excess. And we'll also look at how the interbasin transfer impacts that adequacy analysis for your current certificates for the county. Then if there are gaps, and we're going to look at these regardless, but what are the opportunities for water reuse? Are there opportunities for reservoir expansion or aquifer storage? Just looking at the broad picture of what other opportunities are available for water supply, whether it's raw or finished. And that could mean like some partnership with another community or something like that to get additional water. So we're going to look at all those opportunities. And based on what our findings are, we'll be able to identify and prioritize based on cost benefit, resiliency, regulatory, things like that, the path forward and to develop your portfolio of water resources. All right. So what our schedule looks like, first thing, there's many tasks, several tasks that are going to be going on in parallel. I mentioned the NPDES permitting and the water quality model. Well, that needs to get started right away. We need to develop the modeling and sampling plan, get in front of DWR, and nothing. DWR and the state agencies in particular are having challenges with staffing these days. And so we need to get in front of them quickly, show them our plan and allow them and get their buy-in in so that we can plan appropriately for when that window for field work opens up and start doing that field work. So the field work, the sampling, then has to go to a lab. Anyway, I'm getting way into the details, but it's just a process that needs to be managed from a time perspective. And so we're going to be working on, doing the upfront planning as much as possible, starting the stakeholder process, getting out in the field, doing the NPDES permitting, and getting ready for the modeling, and just to move the project forward to a timely completion to get submissions into DWR. So that was the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer questions.
I didn't see specific timelines on there. Like the permitting, what's the target to have the application completed?
Well,
if we started today.
Well, what we're anticipating is that we will have a submittal to the state for speculative limits in about 18 months. Okay, it might be a little bit sooner, but it's in that time frame. And then after that, that's when the time frame kind of gets, the control of the time frame gets taken away from us. once the speculative limits go in and we get freed up to do the EAA, then that's going to be even more coordination with DWR and the regulatory agencies, because they look at the environmental assessment and the documentation very closely. And we're talking 30 some agencies, from Wildlife Resources to U.S. Fish and Wildlife to weighing in and giving us comments that we have to address and respond to. And I don't envision this to be the case at all, but we did some work for the new discharge for Charlotte Water, and we had to go through the EIS process, and that was a 10-year window. So I don't anticipate that. I anticipate this being a regular environmental assessment, and the reason for that is the Rocky River at this discharge location has a lot of assimilative capacity, from what we understand.
How much of that 10-year process would have been reduced if Diener or the water resource folks had the adequate staffing that was necessary? Would it have been normally a 5-year process, or?
This was started back in 2006, so that's hard to answer.
The reason I'm asking is because I had a call recently from the chairman of the county commissioners, and he was in a conversation with a senator that we know. And the senator that we know was saying, when is this permit application going to be ready? And when do you anticipate you're going to turn it over to them? Because I want to make sure they have the staff that they need in order to get the project done without any hiccups, without any delay whatsoever. So I guess it's really important for us to have some idea, so that when they go back to the short session for next spring, that they will, or this spring, that they will have some idea when we're going to hit them with that, because this senator has real interest in making sure that we get our project approved without any hiccups and without any delays in the system. And that's going to be tremendously valuable to us. So I guess the question, Michael, that needs to be said, when do we tell him, or when should we let him know that we're going to be going to Diener with this application, and that they need to have their people already in-house to do that kind of permitting work?
So the speculative limits application is anticipated in 18 months. Okay. And then there will be some additional time after that for the environmental assessment. That could be 6 months, a year, for those two components, the EAA and the EA, to be completed. It just depends on what the regulatory agencies require to be included in that environmental assessment.
Sounds like then what we need to say to him is, you need to find out from the secretary, from Diener, as to when and what she needs, because this short session would be the time he would need to be making that funding available for them, so that they didn't have time to hire, get ready, and all the other things.
Right. So what I can also say is that this team that we have is very experienced. They, like I said before, they have personal relationships with the regulatory employees. And our approach is, when we turn something into them, they've probably already seen it before. They've already weighed in on it. We've essentially checked all the boxes that they need checked, so that we can help facilitate the process. And I believe that based on our previous experience around the area, around the state, that we've used this process, and we've been able to move these permit applications forward faster, just because of those relationships.
He's absolutely committed to make sure that the next Eli Lilly is ready to come to Cabarrus County, and that Cabarrus County is going to have the capacity that's necessary to handle.
But I do think this board needs to understand that to getting to a point where we have a permit in hand for say 42 or 44, whatever, that is a 4-year process type of a number.
Yes.
Maybe you get lucky and you do it 3 or 3.5. It may be 4.5. It is not a 18-month or 24-month process, even in the best of times. But the
That just means you gotta-
10-year one he's talking about was a new greenfield plan, a significant new contribution and a more challenging water body to discharge
2
into.
states.
Yeah, that was a different story, but we are looking at 4 years or some time period. So.
That just means you gotta get it built in a year once we get the permit in.
Exactly.
So that is just tied to the NPDES permit. The other 5 tasks will be completed prior to 18 months from now.
Right, right.
So do we have a timeline on that?
Well, what we had committed to Michael was that we would have information for the CIP by the end of the year. And then the ensuing couple of months into 2023, we'll be finalizing the master plan and the dashboards and getting those tweaked and turned.
And that CIP is important because that feeds the future system development calculations, system development fee calculations that have to be done next year. So that's what we need, that project list, and that best we can understand capital needs over the coming years to support that system development fee calculation.
Everybody has to recalculate this year.
So how far out are we looking for the CIP?
The end of the year.
No, I'm talking about how far out are we looking to kind of put the CIP together? At least 10 years.
25.
Okay.
25.
The 10 years is the most important.
Questions for Mike or Chad?
We talked about these speculative limits earlier we were talking about Muddy Creek and the permit to expand to 1 million. And when we got the limits on that, we thought, I think, but it fairly is, they were too stringent.
Right.
Have those been revisited, or will this give us an opportunity to revisit those?
And that's one reason that we carefully left in that Muddy Creek plan some wording that could be relooked at. The challenge there at Rocky River and at Muddy Creek was there was not a model that the state had confidence in.
Yeah.
And we were going to fulfill that lack of a model that they're confident in. So what we're, I think, anticipating, obviously hoping for, would be that model will give us the data that is necessary to not only support Muddy Creek or support Rocky River speculative limits, but help us out to looking at that permit at Muddy Creek and going back and addressing those concerns. Because we had them clearly identify that if you have not used the permit, if it has not been activated, then the anti-backsliding rules do not apply. So we can look at those limits and potentially adjust those limits.
That'll be an input into the model that we're going to develop is the discharge from Muddy.
This model of the Rocky River is sorely needed for an extended period of time.
Can we get a copy of the presentation? Is that possible?
It's on the computer.
I'll get it to you.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
So we know it's a huge study, but it's very, very important. We're confident in the team we've selected to do this. It is going to be of vital importance that not only this board, we keep the board involved and input from the board, but your members of staff and the jurisdictions, that collaborative effort is going to be so important to this process moving forward.
I was kind of chuckling at the scientifically based data that we're going to provide to them, but the state doesn't apparently.
Science hasn't mattered very much.
Scientific data.
That's a little bit.
All right. Thank you for that presentation, Mike. Okay, next item, how to pay for this, right?
Do we need to?
We need to
make a
vote.
Yeah, we need a motion, I think, to approve the scope of services and fee for Black and Beach.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry.
Sorry, make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion for the second. Any other discussion? I must say, I've done this a long time and I've never approved a $3.6 million study, but that was a pretty comprehensive set of services. So I get it. I support it. Any other discussion, comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, now, Michael,
All right, now I'm asking to set up a capital project ordinance for the master plan and also transfer the money from retained earnings out of the annual budget. For $3,671,809.
Do I hear a motion to that effect?
Motion to approve both items.
Second.
It's
Motion and
Lynn second.
All right, any discussion to that motion? All right, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, let's roll on to the report.
Well, this was a presentation that was a long time in the coming, in the making, and highly anticipated by for me. But we did complete the first 5 distributions of wastewater capacity to the jurisdictions. And I'm happy to report, and I'm sure all jurisdictions are happy to experience that the numbers were bigger than we thought at one point in time. So we are happy to be able to get that capacity out and to be able to turn that over to the jurisdictions to control and be able to plan and move forward with that. So I just wanted to make the presentation, make sure, give you an opportunity if anybody had any questions about any of the numbers, any of the plan going forward, or any of the mechanics of how any of this worked, to be happy to address those questions.
I just say I appreciate y'all's work. I know this was not easy and not easy dealing with all the things you had to deal with, but we appreciate you finally getting us there.
And I do want to point out to the board, I want to give Thomas Hahn credit for crunching a whole lot of numbers and leaving it to where I just had to check behind and make sure everything added up. But I do want the board to know the effort that he put forth over the last 6-9 months tracking all this has been massive. And we definitely had the right guy for doing that. So.
Very good job. I totally agree.
So are we looking at pursuing the flow factor reduction any further?
Not at this point, not right now. I think the master plan is probably going to give us a little bit of data that we may can utilize to that. I think that is certainly something that we want to, we don't have the data set right now to do that yet. But I think that along with the exploring, once we move, we actually start moving dirt, being able to permit beyond our 26.5. I think those are 2 aces in the hole that we have that we will most likely utilize or need to utilize, but it's not quite the time, in my view, for us to try to play those quite yet.
Well, we do have the adjustment coming on multifamily.
That has been completed. So that is part of this. That was distribution number 5. That was another 377,000 gallons.
Okay.
So that was complete, and it was at the 80 gallons per bedroom.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Chad? Good job, you staff. Okay, Michael, got another report on revenue bond.
Just want to keep you informed on the bonds for the expansion. Charlotte Water has executed Amendment 9, which they're going to fund 40%, 26.4% expansion and 26.47 of their repair and upgrade costs. Currently estimated the project first phase at 109 million. Moving forward with the revenue bonds. There's been a lot of discussion about the eligibility of the ARP money being used for design build. Our attorneys have expressed some concern, and we've been back and forth on that. And just to be on the safe side, we decided to apply that toward the Lower Cottle Creek expansion, or Lower Cottle Creek parallel interceptor, which will be a standard design bid build, which is clearly eligible for use of that money. So that'll clear up any concerns. Since the debt service will be from one or the other, it really doesn't impact the jurisdictions in one way or another. So we're moving forward with that. We are asking the jurisdictions to sign the wastewater sewer agreement, which basically serves as sort of our guarantee that you'll pay us in the future. It gives the people that buys the bonds a comfort level, so we'll get a higher credit rating. Mount Pleasant has signed theirs. County has it on the agenda.
That's right. Harrisburg
Has
has
it
it
on.
on the agenda. Concord, I think staff is reviewing it. I talked to Valerie today.
It'll
And,
be on in March.
be on the March, and then Kannapolis is the one we're still waiting to hear back from Wally. I don't know if either of you guys know if it's gonna be on your agenda for March.
Yeah, our second March meeting.
Okay.
Likely where it'll be.
Perfect. That'll be good, because that is one of the things we do need to get back to the bond, so that'd be good if we could get it all done in March.
And then we will also come back with our copy of the agreement for our board to execute on. So
That's right. That'll be on, the next month, March 17th meeting.
I have outlined the calendar of when we the different steps in the bond application. This is WSAC's first time for issuing revenue bonds. Surprisingly, we used SRF funding in the past. So we're getting our first bond rating with the agencies and going through all those steps for the first time. So it's a little more complicated than normal, but we'll go through. We do anticipate selling the bonds around the 1st of May. So we should be able to come to the board with the final EMP sometime in May. With the final price for the first phase 3, 30 million gallons in May for your approval and award the bonds and move forward as quickly as possible. We are getting ready. We have upfronted several of the GMPs, and they are getting ready to start the electrical work in early March. We had those discussions today, so things are moving.
Mike, this is Lynn.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? I wanted to ask you. Yeah, this is Lynn. I wanted to ask you a question about the financing. Whenever we apply and the LGC gives us the approval and the bonds are approved and all, will WSAC take payment of those funds all at one time and start paying interest on that money? Or can we do like the county's doing, start paying interest on the amount that you use? And that way you're not paying interest on the other money, you're just laying there. So I would be curious as to how WSAC's doing that.
We're not
If
set
you
up.
understand what I'm saying.
We're not set up to do the draw method that the county is doing. This is our first time issue. And we will borrow all the money up front and have the money deposited with a bond trustee that will pay us whatever minimal interest we can earn now until the money's spent.
Okay. Or so we'll be paying interest, but we'll be getting some interest as well, though.
Very little, but yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Is there an estimate of what the bond rating will come in at? Have we talked to anybody about that? Has anybody got a good guess?
I think they said we're looking at A plus. They haven't exactly got it nailed down yet, but that's the indication.
They'll see. Davenport doesn't see any real concerns.
They don't see any concerns. We are healthy financially. The area that we're in is growing like crazy. Those are the things that they look for.
If we can get sewer.
Yeah. You know, we have full customers. There's no industry to speak of it comes to the Water and Sewer Authority, so there's no concern about losing a major customer. And again, these sewer service agreements will give bondholders the comfort they need to know that they'll get paid.
Okay, any other questions on financing? Okay, if not, we'll open up for any public comments. Anybody here like to speak to the board? Don't look like we have any guests.
Public comment is over.
Okay. All right. Public comment session. Anything else from the board?
I have a question, and I'm not certain if it's Chad, Mark, or Thomas that needs to take a shot at this. We said we were gonna spend $2.6 million on rehabbing Lower Back Creek. And Thomas, you mentioned corrosion, which is usually the case. Have we ever considered, I assume that corrosion is from H2S and its associated acids. So have we ever considered using something like mag hydroxide and feeding it at that point? Do we have hot spots, or is it generalized corrosion throughout the entire system that we're talking about? And if it's hot spots, have we considered taking a shot at putting a little extra juice in to control that corrosion at that spot?
Sure, and we do have particular concerning kind of that area. Seems to be bad for those sulfur related sort of compounds, not exclusively hydrogen sulfide or any others, but we've seen kind of a mix of things in that area. We do have some challenges with what feeds to that area and how the age of the wastewater, that sort of thing. But by the time it gets there to that area and gets to the WSACC system and everything, we're kind of dealing with what we have. Now, as far as the system following these upgrades, we're doing some polymer reinforced concrete manhole inserts. We're doing a lot of lining in that area. So we should have a much more robust system no matter the environment heading forward. So we do feed some chemicals throughout our system to minimize odors, minimize corrosion, that sort of thing. But we don't have a great opportunity within the WSACC system to hit that right there.
So what are you feeding for odor and for corrosion?
Sure, we're feeding sulfatrox. So dioxide being kind of a common form of that. So we're feeding that at Reedy Creek. So that's helping at Reedy Creek Pump Station. That's helping at Lower Rocky River and kind of moving on down from there. This Back Creek line is kind of in the middle. It's near those two pump stations, but we don't have a place that it makes sense to have a system to feed directly right there.
And a lot of the damage this system has seen is historic damage. Because you had the I guess Porter's Landing, subdivision that used to be pretty low flow there and about a 6 mile force main or something. Extremely long force main. It didn't have a lot of flow on it. So it would sit a long time and it was old when it got to us. And then Harrisburg historically still has today, I believe, Rob, but historically had a lot of pump stations everywhere. And so this particular system of lines saw wastewater that had been pumped a lot of times or was pretty old. As those systems have developed and grown, you're seeing that impacts, I think, lower, but a lot of it's historical impacts over an extended period of time. So
the reason I'm asking is because we're feeding a Trox product like you're talking about. And I was still having corrosion crazy on a 19-mile pipe that goes to Troy. And as a result of that, we went back and at the upper end of where the piping started and started feeding mag hydroxide. My cost went to a third of what we were spending in the past, and my corrosion went to nothing. I mean, literally, we were sampling downstream from that location to check pH. That's how we were monitoring how much we needed to feed. And as a result of that, I'm no longer replacing air relief valves and other things that was on the line. Now I realize this is a much bigger system and it may be a lot more, but if you had a real hot spot like you're talking about, it might be wise to look at mag hydroxide to do something like that. Because $2.6 million is a fairly sizable chunk of change on a fairly small pipe.
Yes, sir. And we do have a parallel system in that area. So we're addressing both issues in the 30-inch line and in the parallel 12-inch line right there. So it's not a long reach of pipe, but it's basically double because we've got the two side by side with each other. That coupled kind of with the damage in the manholes and doing those manhole inserts, that was a good bit of the cost too. And like Chad said, a lot of this damage has kind of been historic. We don't see so many pronounced impacts now, as far as those high levels right now.
And also the treatment helps with odor control, especially if those pipes are flowing through neighborhoods that are being built along and near those same conveyances.
Sure.
Okay, that's all I had.
Anybody else have anything for the group? Jim?
I have one comment, and it is not going to require any of that discussion we just had. Is Mark back there? I just wanted to say thanks to Mark. He took me on a very extensive tour a few weeks ago and spent a lot of time with me and introduced me to a lot of amazing people that love sewer. I'm so grateful for that. And I really do appreciate it. It was very, very enlightening. I really appreciate that.
Did he by any chance tell you it smells like money?
It's not exactly what I would term it.
But
Sure,
he's different.
he is different.
All right, you have a closed session. Do I have a motion to go into closed session? GS 143, 318, 11A1 and A3. Got a second? I heard a second.
Second, Mr. Heenan.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're in closed session. That's right. All right, we're back in open session. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.